I never thought betrayal could wear a smile and carry a bow the size of a Christmas wreath, but that morning proved me wrong. The room smelled of cinnamon and pine, laughter bouncing off the walls as wrapping paper piled at our feet. My sister Ashley, radiant under the glow of her ring light, held center stage as always, her phone capturing every gasp, every clap, every tear. My parents stood tall beside her, their eyes shining with the pride I had longed to see directed at me. Then the curtain lifted on their masterpiece, a brand new Tesla, gleaming white in the driveway, crowned with a red ribbon so large it could have been mistaken for royalties. Gift. Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Ashley squealed like her life had reached perfection. And then, with a casualness that cut deeper than any blade, my father tossed me the keys to a faded Camry, $1,000 relic half hidden at the back. Laughter faltered. Pity flooded the livestream comments. I smiled through burning cheeks, swallowing the humiliation like I always had. But this time something cracked. I didn't know it yet, but the Tesla wasn't hers, it was mine, signed with my name, my credit, my life. That single act of humiliation became the fuse that would ignite everything. Before the year was over, I would stop being their silent provider and become the reason their carefully crafted empire collapsed. My name is Chloe Clark, and this is how their Christmas gift became their curse. But before I show you how it all unraveled, you need to understand where I came from. I thought I had my life figured out. I'm a senior software engineer at TechFlow Solutions here in Denver, Colorado, pulling in a solid six-figure income that I've worked my ass off to earn. My 2015 Honda Civic has 160,000 miles on it, but she's reliable as the sunrise. And my small apartment in Capitol Hill is neat, organized, and completely mine. No roommates, no drama, just me and my carefully curated life of stability. But families have a way of making even the most organized life feel like chaos, don't they? My sister Ashley is 26 and everything I'm not. When I write code and debug systems, she creates content that somehow translates into 150,000 Instagram followers hanging on her every perfectly filtered word. She's built this whole lifestyle brand around beauty tutorials and aspirational living, complete with regular partnerships with makeup companies and fashion brands that pay her more for a single post than most people make in a month. The thing is, Ashley and I have been playing these same roles our entire lives. I've always been the responsible one, the daughter who got good grades, went to college on scholarships, and landed a stable career. Ashley has always been the creative soul, the one who needed nurturing and support to reach her full potential. That's what our parents called it anyway. Dad, Robert Clark, is 58 and retired from his insurance executive position 3 years ago with a decent pension. Mom, Susan, is 55 and works part-time in real estate, mainly because she enjoys the social aspect more than needing the income. They're comfortable, upper-middle-class people who live in a nice suburban house in Highlands Ranch and drive sensible cars that they replace every few years like clockwork. Looking back, the pattern was always there. Every September, Ashley would get the newest iPhone, while I was told my 2-year-old model was perfectly functional. When Ashley wanted to take photography classes in high school, Mom and Dad immediately signed her up for the expensive private lessons. When I asked about coding camp, they suggested I learn online for free since I was so good at figuring things out myself. Ashley needed things they explained. She was artistic sensitive, required investment to flourish. I was practical, self-sufficient. The kind of daughter who would always land on her feet no matter what. And here's the twisted part, I somehow just accepted it. I internalized this narrative so completely that I felt proud when they called me responsible and independent. I wore it like a badge of honor, even as I watched Ashley get opportunity after opportunity handed to her while I worked summer jobs to save for college textbooks. When Ashley dropped out of Colorado State after 2 years to pursue influencing, full-time Mom and Dad were supportive. They helped her move back home, gave her the spare room to use as a content studio, and called her brave for following her dreams. When I graduated summa cum laude with my computer science degree, I got a congratulatory dinner at Olive Garden and a card that said they always knew I'd succeed. The success apparently was never in question for me. It was just expected. So when the Christmas party invitation arrived last week, I should have been excited. Grandpa Brian and Grandma Helen's annual Christmas Eve gathering is a family tradition going back 20 years. Usually 15 to 20 relatives show up at their house in Cherry Hills Village, including my cousin Jessica and her husband Michael. Jessica teaches elementary school, and Michael's a police officer, and they're about the only family members who treat Ashley and me with equal interest, and respect. But this year felt different. Ashley had been posting mysterious stories on Instagram about an exciting Christmas surprise that would change everything. Her engagement was through the roof, with followers speculating about everything from a major brand partnership to a secret relationship announcement. The comments, meanwhile, Mom and Dad had been acting strange for weeks. Hushed phone conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Meaningful glances across the dinner table during our monthly family meal. Dad had even asked me about my job recently, wanting to know about my salary and benefits, which was unusual since he typically glazed over when I talked about work. Something was building toward Christmas, and every instinct I developed from 32 years of being the responsible daughter was telling me to be worried. The first real sign that something was wrong came yesterday while I was reviewing my monthly budget. I'm obsessive about tracking my finances, a habit that served me well through college and early career years when every dollar mattered. I check my credit score religiously, proud of the 780 rating I'd built through years of careful management and on-time payments. Except yesterday, it wasn't 780 anymore. It was 765 with a notation about a recent hard inquiry. A hard inquiry I definitely hadn't authorized. I stared at my phone screen in my apartment kitchen, coffee growing cold in my hand, trying to make sense of it. Hard inquiries happen when you apply for credit cards, loans, or lease agreements. They're not something that just appears randomly. Someone had to have requested access to my credit report, and it wasn't me. I was still puzzled over this when I heard my mail slot clatter. Living in an old converted house means mail delivery comes with sound effects, and I trained myself to check it immediately to avoid theft. Most days, it's just bills and junk mail. But today, there was something that made my stomach drop. A Tesla insurance bill addressed to Chloe Clark at my apartment address. I don't drive a Tesla. I drive a Honda Civic with cloth seats and a radio that occasionally picks up Spanish stations when it rains. The Tesla bill was clearly a mistake, probably meant for someone with a similar name. But the coincidence felt too strange given my mysteriously dropping credit score. I turned the envelope over in my hands, noting the premium amount that was more than my monthly car payment insurance and gas combined. Whoever owned this Tesla was paying serious money for the privilege. A cold realization started forming in the back of my mind. The kind of recognition that comes from knowing your family's patterns too. Well, I thought about Ashley's mysterious Christmas surprise posts, about Mom and Dad's strange behavior, about that hard inquiry on my credit report. I thought about being the responsible daughter who always figured things out, herself who never needed anything, who could always be counted on to handle whatever came her way. And for the first time in years, I felt genuinely afraid of what I might discover. The Christmas party was still 3 days away, but I already knew this holiday was going to change everything. I just didn't realize yet how much everything included. The December cold bit through my jacket as I pulled into Grandpa Brian's driveway. Gravel crunching under my Honda's tires with that familiar sound that usually meant comfort and tradition. Tonight, it felt different, like walking into a theater where everyone knew their roles except me. The house stood perfect against the Cherry Hills Village backdrop, every window glowing warm and golden. Christmas decorations positioned with military precision. Uncle Dave's pickup truck and Aunt Margaret's sedan were already parked in their usual spots, creating that modest lineup of middle-class reliability I'd grown up seeing every December. Jessica opened the front door before I even reached the porch, her smile carrying genuine warmth, but something else too. Relief, maybe. At 29, she had this way of making everyone feel seen that I'd always envied. "Thank God you're here," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I've been watching Mom and Dad all week, and something's definitely brewing. They keep having these hushed conversations that stop the second anyone walks in." Her husband Michael appeared behind her with his usual polite nod, the measured friendliness of someone whose job taught him to observe before engaging. 3 years of marriage to Jessica had made him an honorary family, but he still carried himself like he was taking notes. The house smelled like cinnamon and secrets, that holiday blend of comfort and anticipation that usually made me feel nostalgic. Tonight, it made my chest tight. Grandpa Brian emerged from the living room, 72 years old, but still carrying that Air Force bearing that 40 hum. Years of service had stamped into his bones. "There's my brilliant granddaughter," he said, wrapping me in one of his bear hugs that always made me feel 8 years old. "Again, Helen's been fussing over your spot on the couch all afternoon." Grandma Helen appeared from the kitchen wearing her traditional reindeer apron. The pattern faded from decades of Christmas preparations, but somehow more precious for its worn comfort. She studied my face with those teacher instincts that could spot trouble from across a classroom. How are you really doing, sweetheart? You look tired. Work's been crazy with the promotion evaluation, I said, which was true, but hardly the whole story. The mysterious credit drop and Tesla insurance bill had been eating at me for. She nodded, but kept watching me with that particular attention that came from 40 years of reading teenage faces and adult evasion. Just remember something, honey. Some gifts cost more than money. Real love doesn't come with price tags. Before I could ask what she meant, car doors slammed outside. My parents had arrived. Dad walked in wearing his seasonal sweater like he was modeling for a Christmas catalog, Mom beside him with that bright smile she wore to real estate showings. They moved through the room, accepting greetings and dispensing compliments. But I caught them checking their phones and glancing toward the door with barely contained excitement. "Where's Ashley?" Aunt Margaret asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. "She'll be here soon," Mom replied, her voice carrying that particular note of pride that always accompanied Ashley discussions. "She's been working on something very special for tomorrow." The way she said it made my stomach clench. In our family, Ashley's special projects required financial support and family investment, while my special projects got polite interest before quick subject changes. Ashley made her entrance at 7:30, precisely late enough for maximum impact. She'd crafted her appearance for hours, every detail calculated for both family impression and content creation. Her outfit probably cost more than my car payment, but it was the confidence she wore that commanded attention. The room's energy shifted like iron filings around a magnet. Conversations paused as relatives turned to welcome her, and I watched my parents transform into their roles as proud patrons of artistic talent. "Ashley, darling, you look stunning." Aunt Margaret gushed while I stood by the fireplace feeling invisible. Ashley accepted praise with practiced grace while mentioning her recent looks. Beauty collaboration, pulling out her phone to show professional photos that made her look like an actual celebrity. The family gathered around her screen with genuine awe, as if witnessing something historically significant. "Such a successful young woman," Uncle Dave said, shaking his head. "Building a whole business from creativity. That takes real vision." The irony burned. Ashley's business had been built with family investment and financial backing. That was never discussed as loans or expectations. My actual career-building software solutions was consistently dismissed as too complicated to understand. During dinner, I studied the dynamics with the detached analysis I used for debugging code. Every conversation orbited around Ashley's achievements and mysterious announcements. My parents exchanged meaningful glances, communicating in that parental shorthand that suggested coordination. "This has been quite a year for our family," Dad announced during the main course, his voice carrying undertones of excitement. "Next year's going to bring wonderful new opportunities." Mom nodded enthusiastically. "We're so proud of how both our daughters have succeeded. Tomorrow's going to be very special." But her eyes focused entirely on Ashley while speaking, and I felt that familiar sensation of being theoretically included while practically excluded. The real warning came during dessert. Ashley positioned her phone with casual expertise and launched into a live stream that felt more like a product announcement than family sharing. "You guys tomorrow is going to be absolutely epic," she told her audience, voice pitched to that perfect frequency that converted followers into engagement. I literally cannot say much, but this is something that will change everything. Life-changing doesn't even begin to cover it. I watched the viewer count climb while comments flooded in with speculation that made my blood pressure spike. Tesla, major sponsorship, luxury apartment, European vacation. Each guess felt like puzzle pieces forming a picture I didn't want to see. My parents beamed at Ashley's performance with Olympic victory pride, and I realized this wasn't spontaneous excitement. This was a coordinated campaign, and whatever they'd planned was worthy of public documentation. The dread building since my credit score dropped crystallized into panic. I excused myself and checked my monitoring app again. Still 765, still unexplained. And Ashley was promising 150,000 followers, something that would change everything. Later helping with dishes, Grandma Helen worked beside me in unusual silence. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who'd observed family patterns for decades. "Chloe, sweetheart, tomorrow might be difficult. Just remember, your worth was never determined by what someone gives you or doesn't give you. You've built something real through your own efforts." "What do you mean about tomorrow being difficult?" She met my eyes, her expression mixing love with something that looked like pity. "Some families lift each other up. Others use each other up. You've always been strong enough to recognize the difference." Before I could process this warning, Ashley's laughter echoed from the living room, followed by more celebration of her social media triumph. The sound underscored everything Grandma hadn't said directly. Driving home through quiet Christmas Eve streets, I couldn't stop connecting dots. Tesla insurance bills, credit inquiries. Ashley, my parents' excitement about surprises planned without my knowledge or consent. For the first time in my carefully constructed life, I felt genuinely afraid of what I might discover about the people I'd trusted most. The responsible daughter was about to learn exactly how much her reliability had cost her and how little her family's love had protected her from their ambitions. Tomorrow would change everything, just like Ashley promised. But I was beginning to suspect not all changes were improvements. Christmas morning dawned bright and merciless, the kind of Colorado winter day where the snow sparkled like diamonds and everything looked picture-perfect from the outside. I arrived at Grandpa Brian's house to find the living room transformed into what could only be described as a production set. Ashley had positioned a professional ring light near the Christmas tree, her phone mounted on a tripod with the precision of someone who monetized every moment of her existence. "Good morning, everyone," she chirped to her audience. Already live with over 2,000 viewers watching in real time. Today is the day I've been teasing you about. Something absolutely incredible is about to happen, and you get to witness it firsthand. The extended family had gathered in formation around the living room like extras in a holiday movie, everyone dressed in their Christmas best and wearing expressions of anticipation that felt almost scripted. Grandpa Brian sat in his usual armchair, looking slightly bewildered by the technology, while Grandma Helen bustled around, making sure everyone had coffee and pastries. I found myself standing near the back of the room, that familiar position of observer rather than participant that I'd occupied at family gatherings for as long as I could remember. Jessica caught my eye from across the room and gave me a look that seemed equal parts sympathy and concern, as if she knew something I didn't. Dad positioned himself at the center of the room like a master of ceremonies, his chest puffed out with the kind of pride that comes from being the architect of a grand gesture. Mom stood beside him, practically vibrating with excitement, her hands clasped together like she was witnessing a miracle instead of a gift. "Exchange. Family and friends," Dad announced, his voice carrying the theatrical tone he usually reserved for toasts at anniversary dinners. "This Christmas represents a very special milestone for our family. We want to recognize achievement, environmental consciousness, and the bright future that lies ahead for those who dare to dream big." Ashley's livestream exploded with heart reactions and fire emojis as her followers sensed something major approaching. The viewer count climbed steadily, while comments flooded in with speculation and excitement. He gestured toward the front window, where morning sunlight illuminated the driveway, and my stomach dropped as I saw what everyone else was now noticing. A Tesla Model Y sat gleaming white in the driveway, an enormous red bow perched on its roof like a crown, sparkling in the Colorado sun like something from a luxury car commercial. Ashley Dad continued, his voice building to crescendo. "Your commitment to sustainable living, your growing business success, and your innovative approach to building your brand have inspired us all. This represents our investment in your environmental values and your entrepreneurial future." He produced a set of Tesla keys with a flourish that would have made a game show host proud, dangling them in the air while Ashley's livestream audience went absolutely insane with congratulations and jealousy in equal measure. Ashley's reaction was pure social media gold. She squealed with what appeared to be genuine shock, her hands flying to her face in that universal gesture of overwhelmed surprise that plays beautifully on camera. She launched herself into Dad's arms, then Mom, tears streaming down her face while she repeated, "Oh my God, and I can't believe this, and you're the best parents ever." The relatives erupted in applause and camera flashes, while Ashley immediately shifted into content creation mode, still crying but now narrating her experience for her audience. "You guys, I literally cannot believe this is happening. My parents just bought me a Tesla. A Tesla. I'm shaking. This is the most incredible day of my life." She rushed outside to pose with the car from multiple angles while her livestream continued, the viewer count now approaching 3,000. Uncle Dave whistled appreciatively at the vehicle's features while Aunt Margaret kept repeating what generous parents and how wonderful for Ashley's career. The social media engagement was explosive. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications as likes, shares, and comments poured in. Brand inquiry messages flooded her DMs from companies wanting to partner with someone who clearly had family backing and serious financial resources. Mom wiped tears from her eyes with a kind of maternal pride usually reserved for graduation ceremonies or wedding days, while Dad basked in the praise and admiration from extended family members who kept commenting on his generosity and Ashley's obvious success. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, Dad's attention turned to me. His expression shifted from beaming pride to something more measured, more practical. The room's energy changed too, everyone suddenly remembering there was another daughter who presumably also had a Christmas surprise waiting. And for a practical daughter who values substance over flash and appreciates real value, Dad said, his tone noticeably different from the grand announcement he'd just made. He reached into his pocket and produced a second set of keys, these ones worn and ordinary-looking compared to the gleaming Tesla fob. Mom gestured toward the back of the driveway where I now noticed a 2012 Camry, parked partially hidden behind Uncle Dave's pickup truck. It was beige practical and about as far from Ashley's gleaming white Tesla as a vehicle could be, while still technically being called a car. It's reliable, economical. Perfect for someone who understands true worth, Dad continued, his voice carrying that particular tone adults use when they're explaining why something disappointing is actually better for you. Much more sensible than flashy vehicles that are all about appearance. The humiliation hit me like a physical blow. 20 relatives and 3,000 livestream viewers had just witnessed my parents give my sister a $60,000 luxury vehicle while presenting me with what was obviously a used economy car worth maybe $8,000 on a good day. Ashley's livestream captured my face in that moment of shock and hurt, broadcasting my private pain to her entire audience. The comments shifted from celebration to confusion and what felt like pity. Wait, why does she look upset? Someone typed. That's still a nice car, right? Awkward family moments, added another viewer. Cousin Tommy, never one to read a room correctly, chose that moment to make a joke. Well, I guess we know who's practical and who's pretty in this family. The laughter that followed felt like salt in an open wound. I forced myself to smile and thanked my parents through gritted teeth, but inside, I felt like I was drowning in public embarrassment and the crushing realization that my family had just demonstrated their relative value assessment of their two daughters in the most public way possible. I could feel Grandma Helen's eyes on me from across the room, her expression mixing concern with what looked almost like apology. Grandpa Brian cleared his throat uncomfortably, while Jessica shot daggers at Tommy for his tactless comment. Ashley continued filming herself with a Tesla, apparently oblivious to the emotional carnage happening behind her, while my parents accepted congratulations for their generosity and wisdom in choosing such perfect gifts for each daughter's personality. During the cleanup after the gift opening, while Ashley posed for more Tesla content and relatives helped clear wrapping paper, Jessica appeared beside me with the stealth that came from years of teaching middle schoolers. I've been documenting this pattern for years, she whispered, her voice urgent and low. Meet me in the guest room in 10 minutes. You need to see something important. Before I could ask what she meant, she melted back into the crowd of relatives, leaving me standing there with used car keys in my hand and the growing suspicion that my Christmas morning humiliation was just the beginning of something much worse. 10 minutes felt like an eternity as I sat in Grandpa Brian's guest bedroom, staring at the beige Camry keys in my palm while Ashley's triumphant laughter echoed from the living room. The humiliation was still burning in my chest when Jessica slipped through the door, carefully closing it behind her with the kind of deliberate quiet that suggested serious conversation. She sat down beside me on the quilted bedspread, her expression mixing concern with something that looked almost like guilt. I've been watching this happen for 2 years, she said without preamble. At first, I thought I was imagining patterns, but then I started documenting things. Jessica pulled out her phone and opened a folder labeled Simply Family Stuff. What I saw made my blood run cold. Screenshots of social media posts, photos of documents, and what appeared to be a carefully maintained timeline of financial inconsistencies that stretched back to my college graduation. Chloe, I need to show you something, and it's going to be really hard to see. But you need to know what they've been doing. She scrolled to a photo that made me physically recoil. Tesla lease documents, clearly photographed when she'd visited my parents last month. The application was filled out in Dad's handwriting, but the name on the form was mine, Chloe Marie Clark. My social security number, my employment information at TechFlow Solutions. My salary is listed as $95,000. They used your credit to qualify for the lease, Jessica said quietly. Look at the terms. $1,100 a month plus $420 for insurance. Because Ashley's considered a young driver with a luxury vehicle, that's over $1,500 a month in your name. My hands shook as I processed what I was seeing. This is identity theft, I whispered. It gets worse. Jessica continued swiping to the next photo. This is the trade-in paperwork for your The documents showed my car valued at $6,000, but instead of that money going toward purchasing the Camry I'd just received, it had been applied as down payment on Ashley's Tesla. The Camry had been purchased separately from a dealer auction for $4,500, meaning my parents had pocketed $1,500 of my car's value while gaining access to my credit profile. I felt like I was looking at evidence of a crime, except the criminals were my own family, but Jessica wasn't finished. She scrolled through more screenshots, each one a fresh knife wound to whatever trust I'd maintained in my family's integrity. Utility bills for my college apartment that had never been transferred out of. My name, meaning my parents had been using my credit history to maintain services for years. Credit card applications using my information for what Dad called family emergencies. Ashley's phone plan charged to an account in my name for the past 3 years. Without my knowledge, even their home insurance policy listed me as a secondary policyholder, which explained why their premiums were so low despite Dad's retirement and Mom's part-time income. They've been using you like a personal ATM since you got your first real job, Jessica said, her voice tight with anger. I have documentation going back to your college graduation. Every time you got a raise or a promotion, suddenly there was a new family expense that somehow ended up tied to your credit. The room felt like it was spinning. Every family dinner where they'd asked about my work, every casual question about my salary or benefits, every time they'd expressed pride in my responsibility and success. It hadn't been parental interest, it had been financial reconnaissance. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Though even as the words left my mouth, I understood why. Without proof, I would have thought she was being paranoid or jealous. Because I needed evidence, Jessica replied. Your parents are smart about this. Everything looks legitimate on the surface. Co-signers helping family members. Parents managing adult children's finances during transitions. But the pattern shows systematic exploitation. She showed me more photos, including screenshots of Ashley's social media posts that revealed lifestyle, expenses far beyond what her influencer income could support. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, spa treatments, and travel that made sense only if someone else was subsidizing her life. I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers and opened my credit monitoring app. There it was, exactly as Jessica had warned me. The Tesla lease showed as a new account under my name. My credit utilization had spiked from 15% to 45%, virtually overnight. My carefully maintained credit score had dropped from 780 to 765, and I could see additional unauthorized inquiries from the past 6 months that I dismissed as errors. The financial damage was already happening, undermining years of careful money management and responsible choices. Look at this, Jessica said, showing me one final screenshot. It was a text message thread between my parents that she'd photographed when Dad left his phone on their kitchen counter. The conversation was about their planned home refinance, with Dad writing, "We can use Chloe's improved credit profile to get better." Terms, and Mom responding, "She never needs to know the details." They were planning to use my financial stability to improve their own situation while actively damaging my credit score and financial future. The emotional devastation hit me in waves. This wasn't just about the Tesla or the Camry or even the money. This was about the systematic betrayal of trust by the people who were supposed to protect and support me. Every expression of pride in my responsibility, every comment about my success and independence, had been covered for exploitation. "How long have you known?" I asked. I started noticing things about 18 months ago when Ashley posted about her new iPhone and mentioned it was a family plan upgrade. But your parents have been careful to spread things out, make it look organic. The Tesla lease was just too big to hide. Jessica's documentation painted a picture of financial abuse that was both sophisticated and devastating. They'd been slowly draining my credit and resources while maintaining plausible deniability, using my success to subsidize Ashley's lifestyle and their own financial stability. I thought about every time I'd felt grateful for their minimal financial support during college. Every moment I'd been proud of my independence and self-sufficiency. Meanwhile, they'd been treating my credit profile like a family resource to be managed and exploited. "What am I supposed to do with this?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of the betrayal. "You have options," Jessica said firmly. "But first you need to understand that this isn't your fault. You trusted your family, which is normal and healthy. They violated that trust systematically, which is neither normal nor healthy." Through the bedroom window, I could hear Ashley still filming content with her Tesla, her voice bright with excitement about her amazing parents and incredible Christmas surprise. The sound felt like mockery now, knowing that her joy was built on my financial exploitation. I need to get out of here, I said, standing up abruptly. I can't pretend everything's normal while processing this, Jessica nodded. But Chloe, you need to act fast. Every day that Tesla lease stays in your name, every month of payments you're legally responsible for, it's more damage to your credit and financial future. She handed me copies of all her documentation. I made sure to get pictures of everything she said. You're going to need proof for the credit bureaus, and probably for a lawyer. As I tucked the evidence into my purse, I realized my Christmas morning humiliation had been the least of my problems. The real gift my family had given me was the revelation of exactly how little they valued my well-being compared to their own convenience and Ashley's aspirations. The responsible daughter was about to learn just how much her responsibility had been worth to the people she'd trusted most. Walking back into that living room felt like entering a performance where everyone knew their lines except me. The relatives were still gathered around Ashley as she filmed what she called Christmas Haul Part 2, positioning herself at different angles with the Tesla while maintaining that breathless excitement that kept her audience engaged. And this is just so perfect for my brand, Ashley was saying to her phone camera. Environmental consciousness meets luxury lifestyle. Some people get practical gifts, which is totally fine if that's your vibe. But I'm so blessed to have parents who really understand my vision and my business needs. The casual dismissal in her tone made my stomach clench. She was positioning our gift disparity as a personality difference rather than what it actually was, a public demonstration of favoritism funded by financial fraud. Her audience ate it up, commenting about how grateful she seemed and how lucky she was to have such a supportive family. I tried to blend into the background, but the humiliation from earlier, combined with Jessica's revelations, made it impossible to maintain any pretense of normalcy. Every smile felt forced. Every congratulation I received about my practical gift felt like mockery. Dad appeared beside me in the kitchen while I was getting coffee, his expression carrying that particular brand of paternal authority that I'd learned to recognize as non-negotiable. Chloe, honey, I wanted to explain about the co-signing situation, he said casually, as if identity theft was a minor administrative detail. It was really just a formality to help Ashley build her credit history. You understand business better than anyone in this family. Think of it as a family investment in her future. His tone was so matter-of-fact, so dismissive of the violation involved, that I felt rage building in my chest like pressure in a boiler. Mom appeared on my other side, adding her own layer of emotional manipulation. You've always been so generous with family, sweetheart. Such a good sister. Ashley really looks up to you, even if she doesn't always express it well. The casual way they discussed using my identity and credit without permission made me realize this wasn't an emergency decision or momentary lapse in judgment. This was systematic exploitation disguised as family cooperation. I need some air, I managed to say, escaping to the guest bathroom where I could finally stop pretending everything was fine. I called Emma Rodriguez, my best friend from University of Colorado Boulder, who now worked as a marketing director in Phoenix. She answered on the second ring, immediately picking up on the stress in my voice. Emma, I need help. Something's really wrong here. I gave her the basics about Tesla, the credit fraud, and Jessica's documentation. Emma's response was immediate and uncompromising. Chloe, that's financial abuse, period. Not family helping, family not co-signing confusion. That's systematic identity theft by people who are supposed to protect you. You need to get out of there and start protecting yourself right now. Her clarity cut through the emotional fog I'd been swimming in since Christmas morning. Pack your stuff tonight, she continued. Drive to Austin. I have connections at multiple tech companies there. You can transfer your job, start completely over. Get away from their manipulation. Austin. The idea felt like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. While Emma talked me through immediate steps I needed to take, I discreetly accessed my financial accounts on my phone. The scope of infiltration was staggering. I was listed as the primary account holder on several family utilities that I'd never authorized. Co-signer on my parents' mortgage refinance from 2 years ago, which explained how they'd qualified for better terms despite Dad's retirement. Emergency contact on multiple credit applications for Ashley, which meant my income and stability had been used to support her lifestyle choices. My credit profile and salary had become the foundation propping up my entire family's financial structure without my knowledge or consent. Jessica found me in the hallway after her expression was grim. I overheard your parents talking to Uncle Dave about their next refinance. Plans, she whispered. They're planning to use the Tesla as an asset improvement and your recent promotion to get better terms again. They're deeper in debt than anyone realizes. And they're counting on your continued financial backing to maintain their lifestyle. So they're basically living off my credit rating, I said, the full picture finally crystallizing. Exactly. And if you don't stop it now, they'll keep escalating until they destroy your financial future completely. Back in the living room, Ashley's live stream was hitting new engagement peaks as her audience noticed the obvious tension. Comments were becoming increasingly intrusive and speculative. Family drama alert, someone typed. Your sister looks really upset about something. Something's definitely wrong with the vibe, added another viewer. Why does she look like she's about to cry? Ashley was forced to address the situation on camera, maintaining her influencer persona while managing the family dynamic. You know, we all have different personalities in my family, she said with a laugh that sounded forced. Some people prefer practical gifts, and that's totally valid. Not everyone needs luxury items to be happy. The way she dismissed my obvious distress while positioning herself as the gracious daughter who appreciated her parents' generosity made me realize she was either completely oblivious to what was happening or actively complicit in the financial abuse. I watched my parents basking in the relatives' praise for their generous gift to Ashley while simultaneously downplaying the disparity as a simple matter of different personalities and practical needs. They'd crafted a narrative that made their financial exploitation look like thoughtful parenting, but Jessica's documentation had shown me the truth. This wasn't about personalities or practical needs. This was about using one daughter's financial stability to subsidize the other daughter's lifestyle while maintaining plausible deniability about the systematic nature of the abuse. The decision crystallized with sudden clarity. If they wanted to use my credit and income as the foundation for their family's financial structure, they were about to discover what happened when that foundation was suddenly removed. I would systematically eliminate every aspect of financial support they'd built around my identity, remove myself as co-signer from every account, close every joint financial arrangement, dispute every unauthorized use of my credit, complete financial independence while protecting my assets and credit score. They'd turned my responsibility and reliability into weapons against me. Now I was going to use their dependence on my financial support as a weapon against them. The responsible daughter was about to teach her family exactly what responsibility actually meant when it came with boundaries and consequences. I caught Jessica's eye across the room and nodded slightly. She understood immediately that I'd made my decision. The game was about to change, and this time I would be the one controlling the rules. That evening, I made my excuses about a work emergency requiring immediate attention, which wasn't entirely false, since my entire financial life had suddenly become an emergency requiring immediate damage control. Jessica and Michael provided cover, with Jessica loudly mentioning how dedicated I was to my career, and Michael nodding approvingly about work ethic and responsibility. Ashley barely glanced up from her phone as I gathered my things. She was deep into creating more Tesla content, filming herself sitting in the driver's seat while explaining the car's features to her audience. The viewer count had climbed past 4,000, and brand partnership inquiries were flooding her DMs faster than she could respond. The drive back to my Capitol Hill apartment gave me 20 minutes to process what I'd learned and plan what came next. By the time I parked in my assigned spot, the shock had crystallized into cold determination. I spread Jessica's documentation across my kitchen table, like evidence in a criminal investigation, which in many ways it was. Then I began the methodical process of documenting my own financial accounts, screenshotting every page, every transaction, every unauthorized connection to my family's expenses. The pattern was even worse than I'd initially realized. 3 years of financial records showed a systematic infiltration of my credit and income that had escalated with each promotion and salary increase I'd earned. Every time I'd achieved financial progress, my family had found new ways to benefit from it without my knowledge. I called the credit monitoring service first, placing comprehensive fraud alerts on all 3 major bureaus. The customer service representative was sympathetic but matter-of-fact. Explaining this was unfortunately common with family financial abuse cases. Next came the detailed documentation. I photographed every piece of evidence Jessica had gathered, created a timeline of unauthorized usage, and downloaded bank statements going back to my college graduation. The scope of exploitation was staggering when laid out chronologically. Tuesday morning, I began what I privately called the financial nuclear option. The Tesla lease dispute was filed first, with me formally contesting my status as co-signer based on identity theft and fraudulent application. The representative at Tesla Financial Services was surprisingly understanding, explaining they'd seen similar cases and took identity theft claims seriously. Joint credit cards were canceled next, followed by the closure of every shared bank account I could identify. Each call required explaining that I was removing myself from accounts that had been opened without proper authorization, and each representative asked the same questions about family financial abuse, resources. The identity theft claims with the credit bureaus were more complex, requiring detailed affidavits and supporting documentation. But Jessica's evidence made the case straightforward. Pattern recognition software at the credit agencies flagged multiple suspicious applications using my information over the past 3 years. Wednesday, I contacted TechFlow Solutions HR about potential family harassment policies. The company had robust protections in place for employees dealing with domestic or family issues, including security protocols and contact restrictions that could be implemented if needed. Thursday brought a consultation with an employment attorney who specialized in family financial abuse cases. Colorado law provided strong protections for identity theft victims, and the attorney explained my options for both civil and criminal prosecution if I chose to pursue them. The emotional journey was more complex than I'd expected. For the first time in my adult life, I felt complete control over my finances. Every account, every credit line, every financial decision was entirely mine to make. The empowerment was intoxicating after years of unknowing financial manipulation. But alongside that empowerment came devastating grief for the family relationship I'd thought existed. Every memory of parental pride in my success was now tainted by the knowledge that they'd seen my achievements as opportunities for exploitation rather than reasons for celebration. I found myself analyzing past conversations with new clarity. Every guilt trip about family loyalty, every comment about my responsibility to help others, every appeal to my generous nature had been manipulation designed to maintain access to my resources. The phrase family comes first took on a sinister new meaning when I realized it had always meant my family's needs came before my financial security and consent. By Friday, the consequences were beginning to cascade. Tesla Financial Services launched a formal investigation into the fraudulent co-signer claims, placing the lease account on hold pending identity verification from the actual applicant. Without my credit backing the lease, Ashley and my parents would need to qualify on their own income and credit history. I was changing addresses on my final few accounts when I noticed something strange happening on Ashley's social media. Several of her Tesla posts had been deleted, and her recent content had shifted dramatically in tone. Instead of lifestyle luxury content, she was posting about family challenges and supporting each other through difficult times. The comments sections were filled with follower confusion about the sudden change and speculation about what had happened to her Tesla content. "Where did all the car posts go?" someone asked. "Why does everything seem different lately?" added another follower. Ashley's response was vague but telling. "Sometimes families go through transitions and we have to adapt and support each other. Not everything is meant for social media." The shift suggested she was already aware that something had gone wrong with the Tesla arrangement, even if she didn't understand the full scope of what I'd set in motion. My phone had been silent since Christmas Day, which meant my parents either hadn't yet realized what was happening or were strategizing their response. But Ashley's social media changes suggested the financial consequences were already beginning to impact their plans. I spent Friday evening in my apartment reviewing everything I'd set in motion over the past 4 days. Every financial connection to my family had been severed. Every unauthorized use of my credit was being investigated. Every joint account that had benefited them at my expense was closed. For the first time since college graduation, my financial life belonged entirely to me. But I knew this was just the beginning. The real reckoning would come when they realized the full extent of what they'd lost and how completely their financial structure depended on resources they'd never actually had permission to use. The responsible daughter had just taught her family a lesson in actual responsibility, and the education was about to get much more expensive than they'd ever imagined. 1 week later, the financial avalanche I'd triggered began burying my family's carefully constructed lifestyle. Tesla Financial Services sent their ultimatum first, demanding immediate payment resolution or vehicle return within 30 days. Without my credit backing the lease, Ashley and my parents needed to qualify based on their actual income and credit scores, which apparently weren't sufficient for a luxury vehicle payment. The house refinance application was rejected next, killed by my active fraud disputes, and removed co-signer status. My parents had been counting on that refinance to consolidate debt and lower their monthly payments, but without access to my improved credit profile. Their application didn't meet lending standards. Ashley's insurance company threatened policy cancellation when they discovered the primary policyholder had been removed without notification. The premium for a 26-year-old with a Tesla was astronomical without someone else's stable credit history subsidizing the risk assessment. Dad's first voicemail arrived Tuesday morning, his voice tight with confusion and barely controlled anger. "Chloe, what the hell is going on with these credit disputes? Tesla Financial is saying there's fraud involved with the lease. This is ridiculous. Call me back immediately." By Wednesday, the tone had escalated to pure rage. "You're destroying this family over paperwork technicalities. How can you be so selfish after everything we've done for you? This is about helping your sister build her future." Thursday's message revealed desperation bleeding through the anger. "Your mother is crying every night because of your vindictive behavior. We raised you better than this. Family comes first, Chloe. Family always comes first." Mom's emotional manipulation attempts came through text messages, each one carefully crafted to maximize guilt while minimizing acknowledgement of wrongdoing. "How can you hurt Ashley like this? She's done nothing wrong except succeed. We're so disappointed in the person you've become." The irony wasn't lost on me that they were positioning themselves as victims of my vindictive behavior rather than perpetrators of systematic financial fraud. Ashley's carefully curated online presence was crumbling in real time. All Tesla content had been scrubbed from her social media, leaving obvious gaps in her recent posts that sharp-eyed followers were starting to notice. Brand partnerships that had seemed secure were suddenly under review as companies questioned whether her luxury lifestyle matched the emerging reality of her financial situation. I watched her engagement numbers drop daily as the algorithm punished her. Inconsistent posting schedule and confused messaging. MLM companies, sensing opportunity, flooded her DMs with recruitment pitches, the digital equivalent of vultures circling wounded prey. Jessica provided ongoing intelligence reports through carefully worded text messages. Parents took emergency loans against house equity to cover Tesla payments. Temporarily. Dad is looking at going back to work, but health issues and age make it difficult. Mom's real estate income is not enough to cover lifestyle expenses. Multiple credit cards approaching maximum limits covering Ashley's content. Creation costs and lifestyle maintenance. Professional photography sessions, designer clothing for posts, expensive dinners for content creation. All financed through credit that was now entirely their responsibility. The extended family dynamics shifted gradually as Jessica carefully shared information about the systematic financial exploitation. Initially, some relatives supported my parents' position, believing I'd overreacted to a family misunderstanding about co-signing responsibilities. But as Jessica revealed the scope and duration of the financial manipulation, opinions began changing. Grandpa Brian and Grandma Helen expressed increasing shock and disapproval as they learned about years of unauthorized credit usage. "We didn't raise him to exploit family trust like that," Grandma Helen told Jessica during one of their phone conversations. "Using your daughter's credit without permission isn't family cooperation. That's theft." The emotional complexity of watching my family's financial structure collapse was more difficult than I'd anticipated. Part of me felt deep satisfaction that justice was finally being served, that the people who'd exploited my trust were experiencing consequences for their choices. But a larger part struggled with genuine guilt about the suffering I was causing, even though I logically understood they'd created this situation through years of financial abuse. I started therapy sessions with Dr. Sarah Chen via telehealth, exploring family trauma patterns and codependency cycles that had made me vulnerable to exploitation. She helped me understand that financial abuse often involved making victims feel responsible for the abuser's well-being and financial stability. Your guilt about their consequences is actually evidence of how effectively they've trained you to prioritize their needs over your own protection, Dr. Chen explained during one session. Healthy families don't build their financial security by secretly using family members' credit and income. The sessions focused on recognizing manipulation tactics, establishing healthy boundaries, and developing strategies for maintaining emotional stability while protecting myself from further exploitation. Friday afternoon, Ashley appeared at my apartment building, apparently having exhausted attempts to reach me through mutual friends and social media. I watched from my window as she stood in the lobby, clearly upset but trying to maintain composure in case anyone recognized her, and started filming. I didn't answer when she buzzed my apartment, and after 15 minutes of waiting, she left quietly without creating a scene. Later that evening, she posted what could only be described as victim narrative content, carefully crafted to position herself as the innocent party in an unexplained Family betrayal. Sometimes people you trust most can hurt you in ways you never expected. She told her camera, her voice carrying just the right mix of pain and confusion. I'm learning that family dynamics can be complicated, and that not everyone wants to see you succeed. But I'm going to keep pushing forward and building my dreams no matter what obstacles come my way. The comments section filled with supportive messages from followers who had no context for what was actually happening, offering sympathy and encouragement for her unspecified family troubles. Watching her weaponize our family crisis for content engagement felt like the final confirmation that she either didn't understand the severity of what our parents had done or simply didn't care as long as she could maintain her lifestyle and online presence. As the week ended, I realized this was just the beginning of a much longer process. My family's financial dependence on my credit and income had been years in the making, and the consequences of removing that support would continue cascading for months. The responsible daughter had finally learned to be responsible to herself first, and the education was proving more expensive for everyone than anyone had anticipated. 3 months later, I stood in my new Austin apartment, watching the sunrise paint the downtown skyline in shades of gold and pink. The move to Texas had been surprisingly smooth once TechFlow Solutions approved my remote work transition with eventual transfer to their Austin Tech hub in what locals called Silicon Hills. Emma had been invaluable with virtual apartment hunting, helping me find this perfect one-bedroom in East Austin, walking distance from the tech corridor where companies like Indeed and Dell anchored a thriving startup ecosystem. The professional transformation had been immediate and dramatic, away from the constant emotional drain of family drama. My work performance improved substantially. I was sleeping better, thinking clearer, and approaching projects with an energy and focus I hadn't felt in years. The lead engineer promotion opportunity arose through my dedicated leadership on a major client implementation, completely unrelated to any company acquisition or external factors. Just pure merit and performance. My original stock options from the TechFlow hire package were beginning to vest according to schedule, providing additional financial security that felt entirely earned rather than inherited or manipulated. For the first time in my adult life, every dollar in my bank account belonged completely to me. Dr. Sarah Chen had recommended a colleague in Austin who specialized in family trauma recovery, and the transition to in-person EMDR sessions made a significant difference in processing childhood scapegoating patterns and recognizing financial manipulation tactics I'd normalized for years. The therapy was intensive but transformative, helping me understand how systematically I'd been conditioned to prioritize family needs over my own well-being. The support group for family financial abuse survivors provided community validation I hadn't known I needed. Hearing other people's stories made me realize how common these patterns were and how sophisticated family financial exploitation could become. I wasn't alone, I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't overreacting. During one of my grief counseling sessions, addressing the loss of the family relationship fantasy I'd carried for decades, I met Tyler Mitchell. He was 34, an art therapist processing his own loss after his sister died in a car accident the previous year. Our friendship developed slowly and authentically, based on shared healing experiences rather than trauma bonding or mutual damage. Tyler had this way of listening that made me feel heard without judgment, and his perspective on family dynamics came from professional training, combined with personal experience of loss. We started meeting for coffee after our respective therapy appointments, then hiking in the hill country on weekends, building something genuine and healthy. Meanwhile, the consequences for my family continued cascading in ways that Jessica documented through carefully worded updates. The Tesla had been repossessed after 3 months of missed payments, dealing a devastating blow to Ashley's remaining brand credibility. How do you explain the sudden disappearance of your luxury lifestyle to 150,000 followers without admitting financial instability? The house refinance had proven impossible with my parents' damaged credit profile and the removal of my financial backing. They'd been forced to downsize to a smaller rental property, a humbling transition that required selling furniture and belongings, accumulated over decades of upper-middle-class comfort. Ashley had moved back home, her social media presence shifting dramatically to humble journey content about learning life lessons and personal growth through adversity. The engagement was terrible compared to her previous luxury lifestyle posts, and several major brand partnerships had been quietly terminated. Jessica reported that the extended family was increasingly siding with me as the full scope of the financial abuse Grandpa Brian and Grandma Helen had been particularly shocked by the systematic nature of the exploitation, and they'd quietly modified their will provisions. Dad's inheritance was reduced, while Jessica and I were added as equal beneficiaries. Actions have consequences, even for family. Grandma Helen had told Jessica, "We raised him to be better than that." But perhaps the most significant change was the personal rediscovery I was experiencing in Austin. For years, I'd suppressed interests and desires that didn't fit the responsible daughter role my family had assigned me. Now, I was exploring passions I'd forgotten I had. Rock climbing at local Austin crags gave me physical challenges that had nothing to do with work performance or family expectations. The focus required to navigate routes demanded complete presence in the moment, a meditation that helped quiet the anxiety and hypervigilance that family trauma had created. Cooking classes featuring Texas cuisine introduced me to a creative outlet that combined precision with experimentation, learning to make authentic barbacoa and understanding the science behind. Perfect cornbread felt like reclaiming parts of myself that had been dormant for years. Creative writing workshops at local community centers allowed me to process my experiences through storytelling, finding my voice in ways that had nothing to do with technical documentation or family crisis management. For the first time, I was experiencing authentic self-expression without family, judgment, or financial pressure. The woman I was becoming in Austin felt more real than the person I'd been in Denver, away from the constant need to manage family dynamics and financial exploitation. I was discovering interests, opinions, and desires that were entirely my own. Tyler noticed the changes during one of our weekend hikes through the Barton Creek Greenbelt. "You seem lighter," he said as we paused to watch kayakers navigate the creek below. "Like you're finally living for yourself instead of managing everyone else's expectations." He was right. The responsible daughter role had required suppressing so much of my authentic self that I'd forgotten who I actually was underneath all that obligation and hyperfunction. Austin was giving me space to rediscover myself without the constant pressure to be useful to people who saw my resources as family assets rather than personal achievements. But even as I built this new life, I knew the story with my family wasn't finished. The consequences of their financial abuse were still unfolding, and eventually there would need to be some kind of resolution or permanent separation. For now, though, I was content to focus on building something real and authentic in a place where my worth wasn't measured by my utility to others. 6 months into my Austin life, the transformation felt so complete that sometimes I barely recognized the person I'd been in Denver. My stock options had vested according to the original schedule, providing financial security that belonged entirely to me without any family complications or hidden obligations. The money represented pure professional achievement, untainted by manipulation or exploitation. Tyler and I had developed something I'd never experienced before, a relationship built on mutual healing rather than mutual need. Our connection deepened through shared grief counseling sessions where we processed loss in healthy ways, weekend hiking adventures through the Texas Hill Country where we could talk for hours without performing for anyone, and his art therapy workshops where I discovered creative expressions I'd suppressed for years. The professional recognition was equally transformative. I'd successfully led a major software implementation project that gained industry attention throughout Austin's vibrant startup scene. Tech meetups became networking opportunities where people knew my name and respected my expertise. Conference speaking invitations arrived regularly, focusing on team leadership and remote work optimization strategies I'd developed. My LinkedIn profile flourished as my career advanced without the constant drain of family obligations and financial manipulation. For the first time, my mental energy and resources were entirely focused on my own goals rather than managing other people's crises and expectations. Jessica's updates about my family painted a picture of continued consequences and adaptation. Ashley's influencer career had completely pivoted to MLM schemes, desperately promoting fitness challenges, essential oils, and cryptocurrency investment opportunities to followers who were increasingly uninterested in her new content direction. Her engagement had dropped 70% without luxury lifestyle props to showcase. My parents' financial situation had stabilized at a significantly lower standard of living after downsizing and eliminating the lifestyle expenses they'd maintained through my unknowing subsidization. The adjustment was apparently difficult but necessary, forcing them to live within their actual means for the first time in years. More interesting were the gradual signs of genuine change in Ashley that Jessica reported over months of careful observation. Fewer social media posts, less polished content, and occasional glimpses of vulnerability beneath the influencer facade suggested something deeper was shifting. She's enrolled in community college business courses, Jessica told me during one of our regular check-ins, working part-time retail at Target. She's actually learning about real work for the first time in her life. The image of Ashley in a red polo shirt helping customers find bathroom supplies was both humbling and oddly hopeful. Maybe losing the artificial lifestyle would force her to discover who she actually was underneath all that performance. My therapy with Dr. Chen reached a significant breakthrough around this time, focusing on processing grief about the healthy family relationship I'd never actually experienced while accepting the reality of my biological family's limitations. The forgiveness work was complex, involving releasing anger and resentment for my own mental health rather than condoning their harmful behavior. You can forgive someone for your own healing while still maintaining boundaries that protect you from future harm, Dr. Chen explained. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation or trust restoration. It just requires letting go of the emotional burden that anger creates. Tyler's presence during this healing process provided a model for healthy relationship dynamics I'd never witnessed. Our first exchange of I love you happened during a vulnerable conversation about family trauma patterns and recovery strategies, spoken without manipulation or obligation attached. We'd started attending couples therapy sessions together, not because we had major problems, but because we both wanted to ensure we weren't recreating unhealthy patterns from our families of origin. The relationship felt like a collaboration between equals rather than a rescue, mission, or codependent arrangement. The peaceful progress was disrupted when Dad attempted contact through several mutual relatives, each conversation escalating in desperation as family members refused to provide my contact information or location details. When indirect methods failed, he escalated to a surprise visit at my workplace in Austin. TechFlow Solutions. Security handled the situation professionally but firmly. When he became agitated about his ungrateful daughter destroying the family over money disagreements, watching him escorted from the building by security guards was both satisfying and deeply sad. Confirmation that my boundaries were necessary but painful to maintain. The incident prompted me to formalize protection through a cease and desist letter from an attorney, establishing legal documentation of harassment patterns and boundary violations. It felt like drawing a line in permanent ink around the life I'd built in Austin. The Thanksgiving invitation from Grandpa Brian and Grandma Helen arrived in October, carefully worded to indicate this would be the first potential family gathering since the Christmas disaster. More importantly, the invitation made clear that my parents would not be attending due to ongoing boundary violations and trust destruction. We understand if you're not ready for family gatherings yet, the letter read in Grandma Helen's careful handwriting. But we want you to know that you're always welcome in our home, and we support the decisions you've made to protect yourself. Tyler found me reading the invitation for the third time, sitting on our apartment balcony watching the Austin skyline light up as evening approached. How do you feel about it? He asked, settling into the chair beside me. Scared, I admitted. It's been almost a year since I've seen any family members besides Jessica. What if being around them brings back all the old patterns and feelings? Tyler was quiet for a moment, considering his words with the careful attention of someone trained in therapeutic communication. You're not the same person who left Denver last Christmas. You have tools now, boundaries, a support system, and you can leave anytime you want. He was right. The woman who discovered systematic financial abuse on Christmas morning had been trapped by loyalty and conditioning. The woman sitting in Austin had choices, resources, and the hard-earned wisdom to protect herself. But even with all that growth and healing, the prospect of facing my extended family felt like walking back into a world I'd learned to navigate as a child rather than the adult I'd become. The decision about Thanksgiving would test everything I'd learned about boundaries, healing, and the difference between family loyalty and self-protection. Thanksgiving arrived colder than I expected, the kind of crisp New England air that bites at your cheeks and makes you grateful for the warmth of a scarf. I sat in the passenger seat while Tyler drove us toward my grandparents' house. In Connecticut, my hands twisted together in my lap. Almost a year had passed since that Christmas morning when everything shattered, and after weeks of therapy and long conversations with Tyler, I had decided I was ready. Ready to face the family I still had. Ready to walk back into a space that once only meant shame and betrayal. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw the glow of candles in the front windows, silhouettes of cousins and uncles moving inside. My chest tightened, but then Tyler reached for my hand. He didn't say anything, just squeezed steady and grounding. That was enough. Jessica and Michael were already there, standing near the entryway. Jessica rushed forward, wrapping me in a hug that was stronger than anything I had felt in months. She whispered that she was proud of me for coming, proud of me for surviving, and then stepped aside so Michael could nod his quiet approval. For once, I did not feel like an outsider at my own family's gathering. Inside the living room was filled with familiar smells of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and the faint sweetness of pumpkin pies cooling on the counter. My grandparents Brian and Helen greeted us with tears in their eyes. My grandfather's grip was firm. His military bearings softened only by the way his voice cracked when he told me it was good to see me home. My grandmother held my face in her hands, whispering that she had prayed for this moment. Notably absent were my parents and Ashley. Their chairs at the long dining table remained empty, intentionally left unused. It was a decision Brian and Helen had made clear in their invitation. They wanted peace, not drama. They wanted this gathering to be about healing, not reopening old wounds. As we all settled in, my grandfather stood raising his glass. His voice carried the same authority that once commanded soldiers, but now it held a quiet tenderness. He spoke of family, of authenticity, of protecting one another from harm rather than enabling destructive behavior. He never said my father's name, never mentioned Ashley, but every word was heavy with their absence. Real families, he said, build each other up. It does not tear each other down for personal gain. Around the table, heads nodded in solemn agreement. Later, while others chatted over pie, my grandmother pulled me aside into the den. She confessed she had seen pieces of the pattern for years, little moments that never sat right with her. She admitted she had hoped it would resolve itself, that her son would come to his senses, that love would correct the imbalance. She apologized for not stepping in sooner. I hugged her, and for the first time, I believed she understood the depth of what I had endured. Tyler blended easily into the family setting. He laughed with my cousins about hiking trails in Vermont, asked Brian about his time in the service, and complimented Helen's pies until she flushed with delight. No one pressed us for details, no one asked about reconciliation. And for the first time in years, I felt a gathering that was free from guilt trips, money talk, or subtle manipulations. Jessica shared stories from her classroom, Michael talked about community projects, and the conversation drifted toward the future rather than the past. Driving back to Austin later that week, I found myself reflecting on everything therapy had taught me. I had learned to recognize manipulation for what it was, to value my own worth outside of being useful to others, and to build chosen family alongside blood relatives. There's a difference between family and relatives. Relatives share DNA. Family supports your growth. Work had also blossomed. I had accepted the lead engineer role at my company, along with a substantial salary increase. My stock options continued vesting, and when the acquisition happened months later, the bonus felt like a reward for surviving, not something I depended on. For the first time, my security came entirely from my own efforts, not the tangled mess of obligations to people who saw me only as a resource. Tyler and I moved carefully with our relationship. We talked about the future, about possibly moving in together, but we were not rushing. We wanted a foundation built on respect, not on trauma. Couples therapy gave us the tools to keep patterns healthy, to avoid slipping into the roles our families had written for us. With him, I learned what it felt like to be supported without being drained. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, an envelope arrived at my apartment. The handwriting on the front made my stomach tighten. Inside was a letter from Ashley. It was not printed, not posted online for likes or sympathy. It was handwritten, shaky, but real. She admitted she had enabled our parents' manipulation because it benefited her. She said she had never considered how much it was stealing from me until it was too late. She took responsibility for filming my humiliation, for playing the role of golden child, while I was left carrying the weight. She wrote about therapy, about community college classes, about working part-time retail and learning what real effort felt like. She told me she was taking pottery classes, that shaping clay with her hands gave her a sense of creation she had never felt behind a camera. She did not ask me to forgive her, did not ask to meet. She ended with words that stuck with me. I understand if you never want to see me again, but I wanted you to know I am finally learning who I am without their enabling. I folded the letter and sat with it for a long time. I did not cry. I did not feel anger either. What I felt was released. For the first time in years, I was free from their narrative. My grandparents told me later they kept minimal contact with my parents. They still loved their son, but they would not enable his choices or pretend they had not hurt people. That boundary gave me peace. It told me that even the older generation could learn, could change, could draw lines where once they only offered excuses. As I close this chapter of my life, I know healing is possible, but it has to be a choice. No one can force reconciliation, no one can demand forgiveness. What I can choose is peace. What I can choose is to build a life that enhances rather than drains me, to surround myself with people who see me not what I can give them. If this story resonated with you, you are not alone. Share your experience in the comments. Support others who may be going through something similar. Sometimes the bravest thing is choosing yourself, and that choice can inspire others to find their own courage. The year after Thanksgiving blurred into a quiet rhythm of growth. Austin's skyline became my anchor, its glowing towers reflected in the river I crossed each morning on my way to work. My life once defined by constant obligation, now pulsed with freedom. The silence of my apartment was no longer heavy, but peaceful. Tyler's laughter filled it on weekends. And sometimes the smell of clay from his studio lingered on his clothes when he came home. Jessica and I stayed close, bound not just by blood, but by a shared understanding of what it means to survive betrayal. My grandparents aged gracefully, still hosting smaller gatherings where the air felt lighter without the shadow of manipulation hanging overhead. The empty seats at their table remained a reminder of choices made and boundaries drawn. Ashley's letter sat tucked inside a journal on my nightstand. I never replied, but sometimes I opened it, reading her shaky handwriting as if searching for evidence of sincerity. Maybe someday I would answer, maybe not. Healing did not have to mean reunion. On a late spring evening, I stood on my balcony watching the city lights flicker, the hum of Austin alive beneath me. For the first time, I understood that revenge was never the destination. It was the doorway. What mattered was what came after building a life unshackled, choosing peace over chaos, and finally realizing that my worth had never depended on their approval.